I'd like to welcome you to the second of our senior exhibition gallery talks. This is, you missed the one last week if you weren't here. For those of you that were here, we had a nice gallery talk from the first group of 10. So this is the second group out of those 10. I'm Eric Horn, and I handle all of these capstone projects and the students that are trying to operate their projects for the year. We started doing this a few years ago where we, rather than just having people kind of launch haphazardly into trying to finish up with their whatever work they were doing as seniors, we are trying to get them to kind of concentrate on a major project that they start in the fall and continue until the spring semester. So this is the result of all of that, and I'm glad that you are all able to make it. Of the 5 that are speaking tonight, the first student will be Adrian Whitney, who is from Minneapolis, Minnesota. After her, Timm, who is from Wood Lake, Minnesota. And following Angela will be Kaitlyn John, who is from Lakeville, Minnesota. And after that, Friehl from Albert Lee, Minnesota. And last but not least, Kasarah Smart, who's from Stillwater, Minnesota. Oh, thanks. I didn't know anybody brought me flowers. Thanks. Anyway, if you join me in a round of applause.
Hello and welcome. I think we were clapping before, like during this part of Eric's speech, so I'm just going to mention it. There is free food afterwards. Okay, so I just want to start off, get a little sentimental. Thank you all so much for being here, especially those of you who kind of helped on this journey. Each and every one of you I know has kind of impacted this art in some way or another, and it really does mean a lot to have you here supporting us. As Eric kind of said earlier, I have kind of humble beginnings. I grew up in a small, peaceful, restful town called North Minneapolis. My journey from there to here at BLC actually is kind of long, convoluted, and completely nonsensical. I started off in a small Catholic school for 8 years with a total of 100 students. From there, I did the exact opposite, and I went to Cooper High School, which had 2,000 students. And so after kind of both extremes, when I was applying for college, I was kind of looking for something in the middle. I was like, well, I don't know where I want to go, but I guess I don't want to be a number, so that's kind of important. And as I was going through all this paperwork and doing all this stuff, my mom casually threw out Bethany, and I was like, I didn't really think about that. Mankato, kind of a small town. And then I found out she went to school here. So I had all these things to think about as I was applying. I was like, oh gosh, should I do it? And I did, and I went to the whole interview weekend, did all of that, applied, ended up getting the Yoga Soccer Scholarship, which changed my life. It kind of meant that Bethany would be possible for me, and that was just a sign. It was like, okay, this is where I'm going. Before I got here, though, as a new freshman going into college, I still had all of these concerns. Will the professors all know my mom? Which they did. Will I make friends? Which I did. Will anyone think I'm funny? Jury's still out. I actually started here as a chemistry major. Polar opposite, right? I felt like I absolutely had to do something science-y, since I actually liked chemistry in high school. And let's be honest, no one likes chemistry in high school. I also wanted to minor in art and music. So in summary, I had no idea what I wanted to do. However, one thing remained constant all throughout my life, and that was that I drew on absolutely everything, all the time. Even in my lab reports, I'd be sitting in analytical chemistry and trying to figure out how to work in an illustration. I took my first art class ever, here actually, with Bukowski, which made me realize A, how much I loved drawing, but B, how much I had to learn. and both of these things were extremely exciting to me. Right before my junior year here, I actually realized that making art was what made me happy. I found that the act of creating art was extremely fulfilling, and I wanted to find a way to do that as much as possible. So I switched to an art major with a chemistry minor instead, and everyone who knew me well just kind of went, ah, finally, took you long enough, which is how I know I made the right choice. Once I did that, everything kind of seemed to fall into place. It was hard to switch my major so late, but worth every ounce of effort. In addition, I got one of what is possibly the most well-rounded art education possible from the three fathers of the studio here, Bukowski, Eric, and Andy. Bukowski taught me about technique and control. He taught me to paint and draw as though I were meditating, constantly looking at my source, but always staying calm and focused, centered on the project, usually with the Beatles in the background. Eric taught me how to actually loosen up for once, which, let me tell you, was probably the hardest lesson I've ever learned. He also taught me to look at my art and ask, why am I doing this specific thing? He taught me to just go for it. Whether or not I knew what I was doing, just make art. And Andy taught me some of the principal rules of art, namely his favorite phrase, form follows function. This last thing stuck with me. As a person with a science background, I love the idea of having reason involved with creativity. All three of them together taught me how to speak about art and articulate specific aspects of it. After a while, you learn that I don't like it, or I don't get this, isn't nearly as effective as I think this aspect could be improved, and that kind of thing. Having this well-rounded art education is what allowed me to figure out exactly who I am as an artist. By learning about the different areas of art and art theory, I was able to choose the method that fit me best and explain why I chose that method. For those of you who have seen the postcard for this show, you know that the title is The World Around Us. The overarching theme applies to each of us in a different way, but all of them include a very outward view of life. Each of these artists here in front of me, looked around at the world and expressed what they saw in different ways. For me, though, this theme ended up being very literal. As several of you know, I spent last spring in Florence, Italy. It's been a year since I've got back, and I still haven't stopped talking about it, as we study abroad people are known to do. The longer I spend here in the United States, the more I realized how much my short time abroad changed me. One characteristic I still haven't dropped is Italian time, which means I'm late to pretty much everything. In addition, I traveled more in Europe than I ever have before in my life. While I was exploring, I noticed that each country had a different feeling, a sort of life and mood and essence that didn't really exist anywhere else. When I got back from this journey, I knew I had to, in some way, express the things I saw and learned. After much debate and many helpful nudges from my mentors, I decided that large illustrations would be the best bet. In regards to the format, though, I didn't want these illustrations to be static. I was concerned that stiff, solid, picture-perfect lines would just make the cities feel too stoic and closed off. I wanted them to be imperfect and relatable, as opposed to impersonal. To sum it up, they're not supposed to be perfect. And that's okay. I want each city to have personality and a human touch and life and breadth and character. And I felt like the most true way of doing that was to kind of put a little bit of myself into them. These goals and desires are what made me decide to complete the pieces in a two-part process. In order to give them more of a human touch, I decided to start with large pen and ink drawings before coloring them digitally. Then I turned the prints into giant personal postcards, such as that one right there. Each of these is almost a memoir of the journey, addressed to this hall right here, with my Florence tickets used as stamps. These two details combine to show my two homes in a sense. For me, everything either leads back to this very building or Florence, Italy. You know how people say after they get back from a trip, oh, I left a piece of my heart in wherever. My goal was to take that little piece of heart I left in each of these cities and depict how it might have grown into the environment. They show how maybe I could have been if I had never left. These pieces, though, they don't look like it, are actually a collage of sorts. It's my own way of bringing a viewer into my world and my past experiences. My journey gave me an abundance of photographs and memories of each of these cities, and each individual is me, sort of resembling reassembling all of these together to create a semi-real, semi-fictitious world. The goal isn't to capture the exact image of the city, but rather the feeling or essence of the place. That's why London is so moody, the Swiss Alps are so light and airy, and Florence is glowing with light. It's the seemingly impossible act of recollecting these memories and trying to help others feel like they've gotten to experience them too. In addition, one of my goals is to inspire a wanderlust of sorts. I use some very intentional flattening of space to give each image a storybook-like illustration. My hope is that this will give people a sense of nostalgia back to when they were young and reading these kinds of books themselves, and associate that with travel. I hope to allow people a sense of yearning for these places that they've maybe never even seen. One last thing I was hoping to do was to encourage people to open their eyes. One of the drawing instructors I had when I lived in Florence used to take us to museums and make us stand in front of paintings for 5 to 10 minutes at a time. It may not seem like it, but trust me, 10 minutes is a long time to stare at one thing. As art historian Kenneth Clark said, few people can look at a painting longer than the time it takes to peel an orange. This professor I had would always say, "Look, Bambini, it's amazing, no?" And we would all just kind of sit there nodding. "Yes, Marcia." I'm not sure any of us appreciated it at the time, but after a while, you do start to see all sorts of things you wouldn't have noticed right away. You see the subtlety of emotion in a portrait. You see the way the paint is layered in a beautiful manner, or how all the shadows are actually a vivid lavender. My teacher's philosophy with this exercise was summed up in the phrase, slow looking. So often we buzz through life at an astonishing rate. We are always rushing from one thing to the next, sometimes without even looking at art. We just naturally want to look at it for only 10 seconds, and then just kind of absorb the general notion of the picture and move on to the next one. The thing is, there are so many wonderful and delightful things to see when you slow down. My art teacher in Italy just wanted us to stop, take a minute, and experience the full moment, instead of just rushing right on to the next moment and the one after that, etc., etc. With this project, I was hoping to bring her philosophy into the gallery. By having the pieces hung in a rather confrontational and inconvenient way, they say, "Hey, stop and look at me." The small details in each piece give plenty to look at for a while, and each image has a few small treasures hidden inside, almost as an incentive to look longer. These pieces are about peace and taking the time to truly see something. Now, I understand that the inconvenience of these pictures kind of forces us to change the way we look at them as art, and we Lutherans are not known for liking change. However, I believe it is a good thing to occasionally leave the comfort of routine and explore our surroundings just a little. Whether that means visiting a hidden antique shop here in Mankato or backpacking Europe for 3 weeks. I think these effects are the same, in that we see a new and wonderful part of the world that we may have never noticed if we weren't taking our time. Life rarely turns out as we expect it to. We can try to plan our best, but things do change, and frequently. If anything, I feel like the setup of my prints is a very small and relatively non-committal version of this. There's change that has to be adjusted to, but I believe that if you take the time to embrace the change, it can be a much smoother transition, and maybe, just maybe, it can turn out to be an incredible journey. Do you guys have any questions? Eric?
You want to talk about why some are colored and some are contour drawings?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It's a little bit of, there are a couple of things going on with it. For one, I feel like the pen and ink illustrations definitely have their own kind of essence to them. The color makes the mood, but I feel like the pen and ink make the life, if that makes any sense at all. It's like where it all started. That's the drawing, that's the human interaction. And then with the postcards, with the color, you get to see kind of what that turned into. And so it's like a past and present version of the same piece. Anything else? Yes.
So when you talk about slow looking at paintings, do you feel like you get insights into the artist then? And you take a look and kind of see some of those hidden features?
Okay, so I don't know if y'all heard that. He was asking me about slow looking, and if when you do that, you get insight into the artist. And And honestly, I really believe you do. It may be different for everyone, and I'm sure there are exceptions to prove the rule. However, I feel like by taking the time to look at something for quite a while, you get to see kind of, with painting at least, their brush strokes, the hand movements. Were they quick and vibrant and full of life, or were they slow and taking their time and at peace? You get to kind of see which things they looked at and focused on as compared to, say, some details that weren't as important to them, that kind of thing.
So when digitally illustrating these pieces, do you think you lose that human interaction that you're talking about?
The question was, when digitally illustrating these, do I lose the human interaction? And I think at the very beginning of this, there was a little bit of a risk with that. It's like, ooh, I'm printing them. They're not things that I've just hand-drawn. However, I think that the specific color palettes and the fact that they are not perfect kind of helps bring that, as well as the fact that since these postcards do have a front and a back, I've kind of included a little piece of me along with that, which brings the human interaction back into it as well.
Besides cityscapes, what other type of imagery would you see yourself drawn towards in future projects? Or, yeah.
It's funny that you asked that. I don't know if y'all heard, so I'll repeat it again. He asked what kind of future images I would be interested in depicting as well. Personally, cityscapes have always been very near and dear to my heart, and I definitely will continue them. However, I've also been very interested in figurative art as well. I think it's really interesting what you can convey with just a human's pose, etc. You can kind of convey a lot of their emotions, what they're thinking, etc. So I can see myself doing a little bit more of that in the future, and maybe one day even combining the two. Cassie?
Would you ever make these into like real postcards instead of the big ones, like make them into tiny ones, and if you ever go back to Italy or whatever, find a place to sell them?
The question was, would I ever make these into real postcards? And I don't know if I would sell these in Italy. I mean, I could try. But I do believe I'll actually be making them into smaller postcards. I've gotten a lot of questions related to that recently, so I'm assuming it'd be a good idea. Also, I think that does present kind of a fun element. It kind of it makes it more accessible for other people to get involved in this kind of thing as well. So, yes, I would. Am I going back to Italy? Here's hoping. I do plan on trying to weasel my way into one of the future art trips here at Bethany again as an alumni, yes. If that's all of the questions, then I would like to present Angela Timm. Can you all hear me okay? Okay. So good evening, everyone, and thanks again for joining us all here. I'd just like to start off by saying thank you to a bunch of people. First of all, thanks to my parents and grandparents for noticing my talents at a young age and pushing me to pursue these talents. Thanks to my professors for teaching me all the techniques and skills to grow as an artist. Thanks to my siblings and my other extended family for all the encouragement and helping out with me tonight. Thanks for all my friends for the support in the past few years. And thanks to my fiancé Luke for being beside me through all the good moments and the frustrations that come with being an artist. And for coming to all these shows, even though I know you don't really get art. So my art pieces displayed tonight are the paintings of farm animals and the ceramics that are placed throughout the gallery. One great thing about liberal arts education is that you get so many varied experiences. In the arts, you get the opportunity to dive into several different types of mediums. I've taken most studio classes offered and have worked in a wide variety of 2D, 3D, and graphic design materials. I decided to include both my painting series and my ceramic series because it reflects my interests and work throughout my Bethany career. So first, I'd like to discuss my ceramics. In high school, my art teacher mainly focused on drawing, but for 1 year, I was lucky enough to have a student teacher that emphasized three-dimensional art and ceramics. She was very talented and gave me my first lessons on wheel throwing. We only had about 3 wheels though, and there were about 5 of us girls, so I never really got that good in high school. My serious approach to clay began a couple years ago when I actually came to Bethany here. It was hand building, and though I did not have that much experience with a three-dimensional art form, I was willing to learn. I also took another shot at wood throwing. I needed to learn technique to become a better ceramic artist, and both of these classes did help me to build on my skills and to also become more interested in clay work. The pieces you see here are various jars, cylinders, and mugs, most of which portray a different face. You may also notice that there is a series without faces. The ones with the faces were an inspiration from hand building class. The prompt for one of the projects was to make a face jug. Face jugs were historically used as grave markers for black slaves in the South and early America. I decided this could be a great way to combine the aspect of hand building with my wheel throwing skills to come up with a series of vessels personal to myself. Now you may be wondering, what are these vessels and who are they? While the African Americans tried to mimic the look of the deceased, my vessels are more arbitrary. They have eyes that are just meant to be eyes and noses that are just noses. These are just my people in the style that I make them. They're just faces to be faces. I was not modeling after anyone I know, but there are a couple influences that may have shaped the way they look. My Timm grandparents have been collectors of almost anything you can think of. One inspiration in particular that I remember are some eccentric masks that my grandpa had hanging in his garage. He also had this big red-nosed troll type thing that would just laugh crazily and his hair would come off like a toupee, like a big Trump. It was quite funny. And he seemed to bring it out every time we went to their house. It definitely had a big impact on me since I remember it so vividly. These masks may have also contributed to the silly caricature-like faces that you see here tonight. These vessels are also very gender neutral. I personally think of most of them as guys, but they really don't have a gender. The vessels create a dialogue within themselves because of their face, but also because of their size and shape. This dialogue is that they may mimic humanity, but are not human at all. They are mugs, jars, or cylinders. And there's one plate too. With human design and created by a human. Another way to look at these vessels is through a Christian lens. The viewer can realize that we are all vessels of God, made in His image and by Him alone. We are different and yet all the same in His eyes. The pieces may be empty, but only to the human eye. This is true for all Christians as well. You cannot always see the faith, but that doesn't mean it is not there. The other vessels without the faces were just pieces I had made throughout the capstone project and decided not to personify. I wanted to experiment a little more with glazes and just show the beauty and simplicity that handmade pottery can have. By the way, everything is for sale, so if you need a price list after, just come find me after the show. And I take cash or check. So as a girl growing up on a farm in southern Minnesota, animals have had a big influence on me. A farmer lives, breathes, and often smells like the animals that he takes care of. They literally give you a reason to get up in the morning, while also providing you with food and companionship. While some of my peers may have been playing with the children down the block growing up, my siblings and I were playing with our furry friends. We had dairy cows and daily chores until I was about 12 years old. As much as my siblings and I complained about the chores, it was an experience that I would never take back. My jobs included feeding the calves, cats, and dogs. I would also help bring in the cows in the summer and lock them into their stanchions for milking. Although we don't milk cows anymore, we still have beef cattle as well as chickens, dogs, and the usual 2 dogs and about 50 cats. Pretty much the animals you see painted here today. When I came to Bethany, I'd never really painted before. Oil paint was all new to me, and it was great to learn academic techniques and traditions of oil painting. We started with the typical fruit bowls, flowers, and landscapes in a realist style of painting. After painting one, though, you get to paint whatever you want, and it seems obvious that I would have had inspiration in front of me all along. I mean, Adrian, Kaitlyn, and Taylor drew inspiration from their travels, while Kasarah painted seasons, something all of us in the Midwest can relate to. And yet I struggled to find my subject. The farm had just become so commonplace to me that it did not seem special to share. It's not that I wanted to deny my childhood or my farm life. I guess I just didn't think it was important to paint. But I finally looked at the world around me, and I found the models I needed. It was like my eyes had been opened. I started by painting some chickens. My painting style was inspired by a visiting artist last year, Timm Jones. He is an abstract painter who really built up layers of paint in a personal style. The figures were layered in a way that were popping off the canvas, and I just admired his use of color and the dimension that he gave to each shape. I wanted to mimic his style and began outlining the chicken with tape on my canvas. In this experiment, I was trying to build up paint like he did, but it didn't quite go the same.
It still worked out for the better though, because I began painting in an expressive, high-quality, intensity color style. The painting style came so easily and naturally that I just continued with it. I'd taken all these pictures of our animals on the farm, and so I was able to just continue the series with some cows. And this first cow painting I made is not here tonight, but it's actually in the private collection of Denise Fuller. So if you want to see it, she's right there. Go to her house. When I began this expressive style, I decided to do a little research. The first artist that came to mind was the German expressionist Friehl Smart. He is known for his large, colorful animal paintings of horses, cows, foxes, and other animals. The animals were defined by their colors and what the colors meant to mark. He also painted the animals to parallel the landscapes within the painting. I instantly related to his subject matter and color style. If I were to see my future work when I was a freshman, I probably would not have believed I made these paintings. I was definitely not fond of Matisse when I was in art history, but as I progressed, I realized I had more common viewpoints with him, the Fauvist, and the German expressionists than I had previously thought. My style expresses much through color and brushstrokes, while it steps away from realism to give freedom for art to just be art. Most people know who Van Gogh and Gauguin are, but I really found their styles to be something that spoke to me personally. I just understood it. The color choices and placement are very intuitive, and that was something I was doing. Paul Gauguin said, "If the trees look yellow to the artist, then painted a bright yellow they must be." The same applied to me. I saw orange and blue hues within the cat, and vivid reds and yellows in the chickens, so that is how I painted them. Van Gogh also related to me in the quote, "Instead of trying to reproduce exactly what I see before my eyes, I used color more arbitrarily to express myself forcibly." I could not explain the way I painted these paintings any differently. These animals in this farm life are a part of my identity and my being. To express them in such a colorful manner is to show the spiritual connection and the love I have for these subjects. As for my future art endeavors, I hope to paint a few more animal paintings in this style. And I'd maybe try to incorporate a few of the animals, because right now they're kind of all on their own canvas, except for the one with the 2 dogs and the kitten. I've also recently piqued an interest in sewing in my sculpture class, so I'd maybe like to start working on textile projects. And without the ceramic supplies that Bethany offers, I'll probably need to find a ceramic studio to continue my clay works. I think it'd really be fun to incorporate hard and soft sculpture as well. I think as an artist, you can have your area of expertise, but it also helps creativity to have more than one interest. Just to expand the ideas you have and to not get a worker spot. After graduation, I would like to continue exhibiting in shows and try to apply for some grants. I will try to also get involved in community education, and the next big goal would be to attend grad school for a fine arts degree or an art education degree. So in the meantime, I will be getting married in the fall. I will work to raise money for grad school and eventually be applying to such grad schools. Thanks again for your attention. Does anybody have any questions?
So did you ever paint with like a spatula or something? Or just like...
Okay, my grandpa asked, have you ever painted with a spatula or something? Not really. There are actually a lot of texture tools that you can buy. I mean, I saw some today even that are somewhat like spatulas and they're made of rubber. And I think that would be interesting to try out sometime, but as of right now, no, I have not painted with a spatula. So,
do you have a process about picking out your color choices for when you start to paint these?
Yeah, he asked, do you have a process for picking out the color in your animal paintings? Sort of. I usually kind of start with blues. In a way, it's just kind of intuitive, as I talked about before. I mean, shadows, oftentimes I'll start with like a blue, and I'll put in like reds, and then I just kind of go from there with whatever colors I feel like I'd like to use. Some of these paintings have more of a lime green, purple, teal, and then all the other colors, while other ones have red, yellow, and orange and green as kind of their main focus. But I do kind of have a little system where I go like blue, red, and then, but otherwise it's pretty intuitive. Denise.
Even though you obviously changed the colors of the animals, have you thought about doing commissions for people
Actually, so the question was, would you ever do commissions for other people and their pets? Yeah, I'm open for it if anyone wants me to. I'm actually working on one right now. She's not here. My sister actually commissioned me to paint one for her boyfriend for his birthday, so they're not here, so I can say that. But it's upstairs right now if you want to see it later. Okay.
I'm going to ask you a question about your ceramics, and vessels. You talked about the fact that they're really kind of gender neutral, not really modeled after anything. But what do you think if you had your ceramics in a ceramic show where your name wasn't on them, would you still stand out, do you think, from other artists where they would definitely be recognizable or not?
I think so. I think, he asked if my ceramics would stand out in style-wise in another show. I think I do have a personal style. They are caricatured. My professor, Eric Oren, actually has made some vessels too with faces, and they just do take on your own style, basically. I could definitely, you could probably definitely tell apart one of mine from one of his. If I put it out here, you'd probably be like, this doesn't look quite the same. So I think it would stand out as my own style, yes. Eric?
You can go first.
Okay.
Why do your vessels tend to be smaller?
Good question. Yes, why are they smaller? Well, that's the beauty of ceramics, actually, is that they can be functional as well. So I made these, I guess, to be functional for myself, because I will probably be keeping them. Well, again, everything is for sale, so come on. I made them to be more functional, so that if someone were to use them, I mean, the mug is pretty much a standard mug size, and bowls are pretty much standard size, so that you could probably eat out of them if you wanted. You know, if it's bigger than that, it kind of makes it awkward. But otherwise, they're just a nice size to look at, too, or on shelves and things. Eric?
So now that you have these two different bodies of work, what's the connection for you in the middle? How do they relate to one another?
Okay, so the question was, how do they relate to one another? I would say there's kind of a primal quality to them that relates them. I mean, ceramics is a lot of handwork and building in that way, and can be intuitive as well. Like the faces, I just made them. It wasn't like I was looking at a reference photo or something. And I have reference photos for my animals. I obviously took the pictures, but it's just kind of like a feeling and like a primal instinct as a human being to create. So I would say that's kind of how they connect in that way. Otherwise, maybe through kind of like my childhood, like I talked about masks at my grandparents' house, you know, we spent a lot of time there, so that's a big influence. And then these animals that I've always grown up with. So there's kind of that childhood connector there, nostalgia. White jacket.
Will you be planning on combining the style and the, what should I say, wonderful colors in your painting with the ceramics and put something, maybe a ceramic, say, pig, and then put the colors in 3D form versus on a flat painting?
So you're asking, would I consider making my ceramics kind of like my paintings?
Yeah.
I had not thought of that, so that's actually a good idea. So thank you. Maybe I'll work on that. That's a pretty good idea. I'll write that one down. So yes, I would consider that. Is there someone else got a hand before Andy? Okay, Andy.
I'm intrigued by the idea that at first you didn't like Matisse, you didn't like Fauvism, but later on now you do like them. Would you describe that as a slow process, or did a switch just go off one day and you realized, hey, they're good after all?
I think it's kind of been a long process, and I think it was more of just like, I was uneducated. I really didn't know that much about art history. You know, you kind of in the phase where you're like, all I like is realism. But throughout these years, I've had all this art history that has come, or let me realize the beauty in things like my paintings. The like Fauvism, the Expressionism is really fun. And I kind of sort of liked it before. I was like, the colors are fun, but I don't think that's something I would do. But so it's fun to have that realization and actually come through with something like this. Even today we had our semester trip to the MIA in the Walker, and at first, you know, the Walker was kind of like, oh, what is this? I don't like what I'm experiencing. It's a lot of modern type stuff. I don't know if many of you have been there, but, and now like today, you know, I enjoy it. Like I go in there and I'm like, I want to see what everyone is working on today in the past 100 years. Like so it's just been an awakening throughout my experience, and it's more so that I've been educated in the arts, so. Any other questions? All right, if there's no other questions, we'll bring up Kaitlyn John. Thank you, everyone.
This is good. Can everyone hear me all right?
Yes.
Yes? Okay. Hello, I'm Kaitlyn John, as Angela Whitney introduced me. I would just like to start by thanking you all for being here tonight, as the other two previously had. but it really does mean a lot to my colleagues and I that you're all out here to support us, and just the fact that you're interested in everything that we've been working on for the past year. So we really do appreciate that. With that, I would like to just give you a brief introduction of myself. As Eric said, I am from Lakefield, Minnesota, not the suburb up by the cities. It's actually quite a small town in southwestern Minnesota. So this being the case, art is not a very prominent part of our community. Regardless of that, though, I've always had this passion for drawing and making art ever since I was a kid. In elementary school, art was always my favorite subject, of course. Who doesn't say that and becomes an artist? But I was able to learn some things that a lot of students coming here that I met didn't get to learn in their elementary classes. I learned aspects of perspective, drawing from a grid, and just some basic things like that that I think some people take for granted. So I've always appreciated that. In 7th and 8th grade, I actually got third place in the statewide Minnesota Road Signs for the Birds competition. So when you're in 8th grade, that kind of seems like a big deal. So I was like, I'm pretty confident in this, maybe I can do this. But unfortunately, when I got to high school, I was not able to take as many art classes as I would have liked. It wasn't until my junior and senior years when I was finally able to take a ceramics class and a two-dimensional art class that focused mostly on painting and drawing. It felt great to finally be able to take art classes again, and being able to actually explore different mediums for once helped me realize which direction I wanted to take my art. I quickly realized that the 2D realm was more my forte as compared to ceramics and 3D, as I'm sure my family would support. We have giant Squidward sitting in our garage right now that no one really wants to put anywhere, so if there are any SpongeBob fans in the house, I'd sell that for pretty cheap right now. Anyway, so this really did help me decide the kind of art that I wanted to pursue. I wasn't necessarily surprised by the fact that I was more in the 2D realm because I did always like drawing, but something new that I got through high school was being able to paint with acrylic paint. I found quickly that I really enjoyed painting. It seemed to come naturally. It was just something that you can be more fluid with, and drawing, it seems like it has to be more precise, so I connected to it pretty well right away. In high school, I actually ended up selling one of my first paintings to one of my teachers, whose brother happened to be a professional artist in New York. And so until that point, I hadn't really considered art as a career. I always just kind of thought of it as a hobby. So then the time came for me to register for classes at Bethany, and for some reason I was torn between trying to decide to become an English major or an art major. But then I remember sitting in Mary Jo's office and registering for classes, and all of a sudden something just clicked. Art just seemed right. English all of a sudden was just out of the question. I look back now and I kind of realize that as God's way of calling me to what He wanted me to do. And I think I definitely have made a better art major than I would have made an English major, so I'm glad He helped me choose that path. Little did I know, though, that my art experience at Bethany would be very different from everything I had experienced before. It wasn't until my time at Bethany that I had really received a formal art education. I began to study art history and learn about the masterpieces of the world. I also learned about the basic elements and principles of art, such as composition, aesthetics, and content, as well as the fundamentals, such as line, shape, color, texture, and form. These things all seem like common sense to me now, but before this point, I had never really considered them. I now had to decide which direction I wanted to take my art, and I no longer had anyone telling me what to do. It was all up in my hands. I figured out that I enjoyed painting, so I wanted to pursue that with my college work. When I took Painting 1, we were instructed to use oil paints, which was another new experience for me. I spent much of that first class simply trying to figure out how to use the medium and the different ways it could be applied. I spent the following few semesters trying to figure out what exactly it was that I wanted to paint. After studying art history, I kind of had this expectation of what great art should be. I had favored the works of Caravaggio, Monet, and Rembrandt, mostly for their technical skills such as their portrayal of light and color, as well as their use of brushstrokes. I've been taught all the themes of painting, such as still life, portraiture, and landscapes. So I tried to venture more into each of these subjects in my early work. While I enjoyed these subjects, especially landscapes, I was still looking for something new to do with my work. There was a creative element of myself that I thought was missing from my early art, especially when I found myself getting caught up in the details of realistic art. By spring semester of my junior year, I decided that I needed to take a break from realism and find a way to be more free and expressionistic with the paint. But even though I had this idea, I was still unsure of the direction in which I should take these abstract works. Then, over spring break of last year, I had the amazing opportunity to travel to Italy with a group of people through the Bethany Art Department. Once there, I was constantly finding myself drawn to all the mosaics, stone floors, fresco fragments, and all the other elements of ancient Roman culture. At first, I wasn't sure what it was about these things that was so intriguing to me. But the more I was surrounded by them, the more I was inspired to use them as sources for my own art. When looking at these things, I realized that they were fairly abstracted, yet still contained the basic elements of art. This inspired the new direction in which I took my art, as I thought, why not just return to the basics? I realized art does not have to be complex or even realistic, as long as it had these basic fundamentals of line, shape, color, pattern, and texture. Once I realized this, it seemed like inspiration for my art was all around me, and I was just now becoming more aware of it. At first, I was intrigued by these ancient works that had once been designed for a purpose, to be beautiful and decorative, but are now worn away and all decayed. These works are often overlooked, and so I had the idea of taking these things and reviving them in a way by bringing their colors back to their original brilliance. However, I still appreciated the elements of the decay throughout the works I did and the texture they added, as well as the connection to history that they provided. As I began doing these works that were inspired by ancient Roman art, I also began to notice how much some of these things resembled modern architecture and even modern art. The following October, I also had the opportunity to go to New York City on another trip with Bethany. While Italy had served as inspiration for my work, New York provided the motivation. It gave me a new appreciation for abstract and modern art that I hadn't previously had, but I developed this now as I was better able to relate to these works as I was doing them. I was especially influenced now by artists such as Rauschenberg, Braque, and Kandinsky, mainly for their use of color and lines, as well as their use of mixed media. On this trip, I was especially inspired by a Picasso show that was at the Museum of Modern Art. I was simply amazed by the amount of art one man could produce in his lifetime. It helped me to realize that a true artist is constantly creating new things. Overall, New York not only served as motivation to produce more work, but also inspired me to be more experimental with my own work. I began incorporating new elements into my art, such as sand, different types of medium, and modeling paste. I also began to use the actual paint in a thicker manner, giving it more of a physical presence in itself. I kept looking for inspirational sources around me that could serve as references for my work. I continued to look for elements that were abstract enough that they could still let my paintings be paintings within themselves, rather than a replication of something. All of my sources also contain some of these basic elements of art that I had mentioned before, but are yet fairly simplified, so that they allow the painting to be about the quality and presence of the actual paint, rather than about the image itself. I think these works are rather subjective, depending on the viewer. They can be more realistic if you know the sources they came from, or they can be more abstract if you're focusing on the things such as line, shape, and color. It all depends on how you want to interpret them. I don't think they necessarily require a viewer to relate to them or try to find some kind of story, because they can simply be appreciated for their aesthetics. These works have really helped me to grow as an artist. Firstly, they have helped me have a deeper appreciation and understanding of modern and abstract art. They have also allowed me to be more free and expressive as an artist, being more direct with the paint and allowing myself to react to it. This process also provides me with a constant new idea and inspiration for what I can do next. But mostly, these works have helped me to realize that you don't always have to look at the big picture for inspiration. Sometimes it is just the basic elements of the things around you that can be the most interesting, as long as you take a closer look at the world around you. Thank you. Does anyone have any questions? Eric?
At what point did you, in painting and using the photographic references, did you start to to switch into, oh, these could maybe reference these things, but it started to be your own interpretation of them instead of trying to stick with what's there.
The question was, at what point in my paintings did I decide to kind of make these things my own as opposed to referencing the photographs? And I think with each one, I sort of grew. The first one I did for the series was the one up on this front wall, which, if you really look at it, does resemble an ancient modern floor in Pompeii. And even the worn down texture of it was pretty accurate to what it was. But as I kept going along, instead of looking at my photograph, I would kind of use it more for the original source, or even the inspiration, and then kind of warp it to the perspective I wanted, or even just kind of as a main source, and then let it be more about the paint. So kind of like I said earlier, it became more about putting paint down and reacting to it versus thinking ahead of time, this is exactly how it has to be. Any more questions? Allison?
Is there a reason to why some of your pieces, the rocks or stones, some of them are 3D and popping out at you?
Yes, I guess that just kind of came from, like I said, going to New York and wanting to be more experimental with my work, as well as just kind of trying to venture out into more of a 3D world. I especially like that piece over on that side wall. It's called Reconstruction, and it's kind of with that concept that I was building these things into something new, even though they were something old. And so it's kind of a start to the work I would like to do in the future. I'd like to get even more experimental and work with other things such as drywall, sheetrock, and just kind of layer it up and let that also serve as another function in the art. Anyone else? Yes.
I'm interested in the comments you made about some of the ancient pieces of art. What, after you look at some of those, what became your favorite piece and why?
That's a really hard question to answer. I don't necessarily have a favorite. They did make me more aware of these fundamentals, like I said, line and shape and everything. And so I began to notice those things kind of everywhere, whether it was the subway station in New York or an empty, scratched up brownie pan our professor had in our classroom. Just kind of everywhere I began to look. And so each of my paintings is also quite different, and I feel like that's kind of like asking a parent to pick your favorite child, because we've put so much, everyone puts so much into each piece of their artwork, and they're all special in their own way.
You talked about the mosaic in Europe or Italy. There's a lot of the mosaics that have animals or people involved in their art. Do you ever see yourself doing something like that?
I'm sorry, what was the last part of your question?
The art that you see there with mosaic sometimes incorporates animals or people in it. Do you plan on doing anything like that?
With my future work, kind of like I said, with layering drywall and whatnot, I have some fresco fragments, but with those, I think I would like to keep them still more abstracted, and that's kind of the quality I like even about the ones that do have people or animals or some kind of symbolism in them, because like over time they have decayed, and so you don't necessarily recognize it as a person, and so that's the concept I like about those pieces. Anybody else? Eric again?
Do you see a point in your future where you might just give up references and just paint?
I really do. I have already kind of began to do that with a lot of my newer pieces here, or even if, like I said, just loosely using the references as kind of sparking ideas. And as I've been doing each of these, I keep getting a list of ideas that I want to do, and just like layering things and just, like I said, putting paint down and reacting to that within itself. And I think I'll have a lot more fun with that when I finally do drop references. Totally.
So do you see yourself working in a gallery or?
I would like to continue to try to get shows and put stuff in galleries. I'm also right now hoping to go to grad school in the next year or so for art therapy. And that's also why I kind of like these more abstract paintings, because when you're working with people like that, they might not be able to portray something as realistic. And so I think it's okay to show them that these things can still be beautiful as long as you have these basic qualities within them. Andy, you had a question?
That was it.
Okay. Well, is there anything else quick? Otherwise, I'll turn it over to Taylor. Thank you very much.
Once again, thank you all for coming to our show. We appreciate each and every one of you for supporting us by being interested in learning about the work we've been producing this past year. As Kaitlyn said, my name is Friehl. I grew up in Alberta, Minnesota. I resided there until I started my time here at Bethany. I'm the oldest of 4 children, and I am blessed to have parents that constantly support me. My family has never failed to make me feel confident in whatever it is that I'm doing. So I want to thank all of them for being there for me and believing in me, especially thanks to my mother, who told me pieces of artwork were great, even though they weren't so great. It was unconditional support like that that made me confident in my skills and gave me the drive to produce work that I actually think is great. Also, thank you to everyone else that has given me support throughout my life and during my college career. Even to those friends that have asked me to produce a flyer for an event just because I'm artsy, that has also boosted my self-confidence. Growing up, I always had a creative ability in whatever I was doing. It may not have always been artistically creative, but definitely conceptually creative. I enjoyed building forts and my versions of tree houses. To some, I was considered a tomboy. I might still be considered a tomboy to some, but that's debatable. I was just a kid that enjoyed being outside, creating these visions that I had in my head with the materials that were around me. In high school, my art career wasn't very extensive. There weren't many art classes that were available, but I took the ones that were offered. In those art classes, I was able to experiment with multiple mediums. At that time in my life, I didn't really have a specific medium that I preferred working with. I just liked the act of producing art. When I started school at Bethany, I thought I knew what I wanted to do. I started taking classes to become an elementary education teacher. As I continued taking those classes, I decided that I wanted to start working with art again. So after enrolling in classes, I was talking to one of my photography professors, Professor Waller, and she inspired me to do what I love, and wherever that leads me is where I'm supposed to be. This is when I decided to change my major to studio art. 2 years after that conversation, I started thinking about what I wanted to do for my senior capstone. During this time, I started traveling more and spending time in places that were catching me speechless. And I wanted to be able to capture these moments and share them with the people around me. Taking photographs of my explorations allows for me to take my viewers along with me on my journeys. The series you see hanging today are a selection of the photographs I started taking in May 2015. The central theme I followed for the next 10 months and 10,000 plus miles was my version of selfie. These 10,000 miles traveled produced photos that were taken in 8 different states with a variation of travel and transportation, whether that be by foot, by car, by plane, by ferry, any of those. My reasoning behind the composition was to take the viewer along with me and show them where I'm going or where I've been. I could have been facing forward in my photographs, but that wouldn't have led the viewer into my image. By facing the other way, it allows the viewer not to be distracted by my stunning appearance, but intrigued by my surroundings. As you may have noticed, or not, the titles of my images are a bunch of numbers. They're actually the latitude and longitude of where I'm standing, give or take 20 feet or so. By not titling these photos of my location, it makes the viewer curious, which leads them to asking questions, which is essentially something that I'm aiming for. There is more that I gain in my travels than just flight miles. The overall journeys that I've experienced in the last year are part of a bigger journey that I'm constantly on. Last fall, I was given a book by Richard Bach called Illusions, The Adventure of a Reluctant Messiah. This book proposes to the reader that what we call reality is actually an illusion of something we create that we learn from and from our experiences. This book produces to the reader, or shows the reader, or tells a story about a reader that has two pilots, and they're exploring these illusions. From this book, my eyes have been opened to the new possibilities and insights. I don't think this book is necessarily supposed to be believed literally by all means, but it can teach us a new approach to life. And here are the few insights that I've taken from this book. Every person you've met, all the events that you've experienced are meant to be there and were meant to happen. Whether you choose to, or what you choose to do with those people and how you choose to take from, or what you choose to take from your experience is something that's totally up to you. Secondly, you're never given a dream without being also given the possibility to make that dream come true. You are the one in control of that. Thirdly, it's about happiness. We do not exist to impress the world, but to live our lives in a way that makes us happy. Happiness is a choice. Sometimes that is not always easy, but we have to choose and take our sacrifices if we want to be happy. And lastly, if you argue your limitations, you get to keep those. Meaning your limitations are only things that you believe are your limitations. So whatever you say you can't do is you'll never try, which makes you defeated in the first place. These insights have allowed for me to step outside of my boundaries and try new things. They have helped me realize that almost anything is possible, but you have to attempt them in the first place. And they've also made me believe my bucket list, which is quite extensive, is possible if I set my mind to it. The spiritual journey that I've gone on throughout my travels has expanded my faith. Being on top of a mountain instantly makes you speechless of the beauty and the magnitude of God's creation. My appreciation of creation and the different types of landscapes that surround us has definitely grown over the past year. In Psalm 61, verse 2, it says, "When my heart is overwhelmed, lead me to the rock that is greater than I." This rock has a literal meaning and a hypothetical meaning. When I am overwhelmed, I turn to God to find clarity, but I also turn to God's creation around me to find clarity. So why is this art? The type of photography my series is more of a journalistic, documentary, or lifestyle type of photography. I once read a quote by an author named Layla Akins. She said that adventure begins with a vision or a thought, and then a decision, and then an action. This explains why my work is art. I took a vision that I had, I portrayed it to others in a conceptually appealing way, and then that's what makes it art. It's not the lighting or the technical aspects of these photos, because let's be real, the lighting is different on top of a mountain than it is in gloomy San Francisco. I wanted to create photos that didn't have to be dramatically edited digitally. I wanted to show people what they looked like when I was taking them. The ever-changing shooting conditions were something that I had to adapt to. I wanted my photographs to be something that the viewer could experience when I was there. I didn't want to create a surreal, perfect version of my experiences because sometimes they weren't. For example, I had just finished setting up camp after hiking to a base of a mountain in Wyoming. A storm rolled through out of nowhere, and the temperature dropped drastically. After sticking it out for many treacherous hours, I woke up to the most magnificent skies that totally made everything worth it. It's times like that I want people to know about. It brings it into perspective, that even though you think you're prepared enough for something, that anything can happen. That even though you see this image of me standing on a mountain, you wouldn't know that I'm running on 2 hours of sleep because I was so cold and couldn't sleep the night before. So here's my journey in photographs. Feel free to live vicariously through them, or hopefully they will inspire you to take your own journeys and experience new things that you can't put into words, only photographs. Thank you.
Why did you decide to focus on you and not have the camera focused on like what you're looking at, since you want us to be in your eyes? Why did you choose to do it that way?
She's asking why I decided to essentially include myself in the image instead of just showing the landscape. I wanted the viewer to be like following me, so then they're experiencing what I experienced. If I was just showing this picture of mountains, then
what I'm trying to explain to everyone is a totally different concept than what telling about my journeys. Then I'd be telling about the scenery, then I would be more focused on the technical aspects, and that wasn't my concerns. Thanks.
Want to elaborate on your framing choice? Why you did it the way you did?
Instead of matting and framing these photos, I wanted to keep them simple and the attention to the photo. I also wanted it to stand out to the viewer because having the horizon line at the eye level was an important concept, and even having it stick out made that even more realistic when the viewer is looking at it. Andy?
Let's say you've got a fear of flying or travel in general, and you're not able to go to these extraordinary places. What do you think you would have been photographing instead?
I actually was very afraid of flying. So after traveling by myself, I've gotten better with that. But advice to somebody who is afraid of traveling or isn't able to do so, explore what is around you. Even in Mankato, there are so many different things and places you can go to that you didn't know existed if you don't research it. Even Minneopa, for example, some people don't know that it exists, and it's an awesome waterfall. So.
You may have mentioned this, Taylor, I may have missed it, but were all these pictures taken with the same camera?
Yep, they were. I did not mention, but yes, they were.
So do you set up a tripod and do a self-image, or do you have somebody with you?
Either I brought a tripod everywhere. If I was with somebody, I would set up the shot and have them press the shutter instead, if that was easier for the conditions. Sometimes setting up a tripod isn't the easiest thing to do if you're standing on a mountain, for example.
So when did you start being interested in photography, and once you started, did you look at things a whole lot differently?
I think how she asked when I started getting into photography, and after I did that, if my perspective of things changed. I think this perspective I had for things was always the same. Photography was just able for me to emulate that to people around me. I started taking photography classes from Denise my junior year. So this is my 5th year, so I took a victory lap. So her classes were my first real experience of learning technical aspects of photography. Denise, you said questions.
Yeah, you have one image in the show that you're not facing forward and you're kind of embrace that kind of way. So why did you choose to put that one?
For that one, I chose specifically because I was wearing a brace. Over a year and a half ago, I tore my ACL, and that was a big journey that I had to overcome, so I felt like that was important to include with this, since it was during these travels, and it was showing something that I had gone through. Yes, sir?
Do you have a favorite?
Well, I definitely have favorite places that I've been, so it's hard to pick. Out of these ones, probably the top one on the left or the right over here for you guys, just because the views from there were amazing.
My favorite is the one upstairs in the hammock.
Oh, that one was on Madeline Island, the Apostle Islands. So, Eric.
To me, they seem like the record of a journey, and I know you mentioned the box book, but is there more that you would say about what you learned on this journey? How would you expand that?
I think this journey was more about me finding myself and experiencing things that I was internally craving without knowing so. After I started traveling, I realized that going to these places was somewhere that was necessary for me to be happy in life. That I enjoyed experiencing places that I haven't been before, or even new things about places that I've been before. And showing these images is shows my realization of my life and transformation after traveling and what traveling has done for me.
Where are some of the places that you took these pictures?
Do you have a specific one that you want? Well, I have ones from Wyoming, Colorado, California, Minnesota, Iowa, and Wisconsin, South Dakota. There are other ones. I have one from Illinois. That one did not make it into the show. These 13, so.
Are you gonna continue when you do stuff from your bucket list to take photos like this? Is it gonna be a continuous thing, or?
I think I will, because I want to be able to show change, like as I'm getting older. I think it would be cool to show the changes of me in different places and just as a gradual life experience.
Do you think that today's youth is missing out on picturesque things when they're too involved in electronic devices?
Yes. I mean, I'm not going to say that I don't use Facebook and Instagram and all that stuff. But being somewhere where you don't get cell phone service allows for you to shut out that outside world and experience things that are right in front of you that you wouldn't realize if you were sitting looking at your phone. Sometimes it can, I'm not going to say it's annoying, but like bringing a camera somewhere and constantly taking photos is fun, but you also see it through the lens, which you have to make sure to put your camera down sometimes and see it with your own eyes. I feel like that's very important. Yes?
When you're looking at these pictures with you in it, does it help you remember that specific spot, specific area better than if it was just the picture without you in it?
I think it helps me remember what I was feeling when I was standing there. The first picture I took was the one in front of that lake right there. And that one's one of my favorites, solely because I remember standing there and being like, this place is amazing. Why would I want to leave? Or the reflections in the water were just so beautiful that I literally was speechless, like I said. Multiple times I'm speechless going to these places, but it definitely brings me back when I'm in the image. Yes, sir?
Do you also keep a journal when you're on these trips? Because to me, it seems like as we're looking at the back of your head, I want to know a little bit more about what you might be thinking as you were in this image.
Yes, if I keep a journal. I need to be better at doing that. Denise has helped me work on that, and I would like to continue doing that. My mom got me a waterproof one for Christmas, so that'll help.
This would be an ironic question given your answer to your question about the separation technology, but is there an app where you type in your number for longitudinal latitude?
There's a website.
The actual location?
There should be a website. I don't know about an app, but I'm guessing there probably is an app since there's an app for everything. But so feel free to do that. Andy?
How important is it that these are exhibited in a public space? They record what you were feeling and what you were thinking when you were at these places. But that seems kind of private. If you had not been forced to exhibit them as part of this event, would you have sought out an exhibit somewhere like that?
I think it's important for these photos like these to be exhibited because my aim for them were to inspire people to take journeys like this. And I can't show people that unless they're exhibited somewhere outside of my home, which I don't know where these will go and if they will fit on a wall in my home, but it's more of wanting to inspire others to do what I'm doing and experience everything that this world has to offer. Any more questions? Okay, thank you. Next we have Kasarah Smart.
Hello. Can you hear me?
name is Kasarah Smart. To start things off, I would just like to congratulate the 10 studio art majors, myself included, who have displayed their work tonight, as well as the seniors who displayed their work last week here in our Bethany Gallery. It has been an honor working with all of them throughout my 4 years here at Bethany Lutheran College. I would also like to thank my 3 art professors, Andy Oberon, Bill Pekulski, and Eric Oren, for being there for me during my journey here at Bethany Lutheran College. Thank you to my parents and friends as well for all their support and encouragement. I could go on and on thanking people, but this part of the show is about me and my artwork, and this is how my story began. My artwork is about the seasons and emotions. I grew up with 8 people in my family, so it was a little hectic, a lot of fighting and a lot of good times and bad times. I grew up watching Disney movies. My favorite Disney movie is Aladdin because of the landscapes within the movies. Ever since I was a kid, my family and I would travel to Disney World in Orlando, Florida. I have been there 13 times, soon to be my 14th time in November for my brother's 21st birthday. I am really excited because since I've been here, I haven't been able to go the other 2 times my family went without me. I started to get into art when I was in 8th grade. High school is where I started to blossom as an artist. I remember 2 projects in particular. The first was the study of a curtain, and the second was a still life. As the years went on, I took more art classes. My senior year of high school, I took 2 final classes before moving on to college. The classes I took were printmaking and independent study. I enjoyed both classes very much. This is because it gave me the freedom to do whatever I pleased. When the admissions counselor from Bethany Lutheran College, Dan Gertz, came to my high school, right away I was hooked. I looked at other schools, but Bethany seemed like the right choice. I came to Bethany excited and ready to learn. When I first got here, I was a little intimidated by the art professors, as all of us were. But as the years went on, I got to learn exceptional things from them. Each art professor has their own personality and their own talents. Eric Oren is my advisor. Even though his specialty is in 3-dimensional artwork, and my artwork is in oil painting, our personalities just match. He has been a great advisor and has taught me many things. I've had Bill Pekulski every year for the past 4 years, sometimes twice a semester, if you can even believe that. I've taken so many classes with him, and my most taken one was painting 1 through 6 here. He loves talking about the Italy trip, as some of these girls have mentioned, like Adrian and Kaitlyn. And someday I hope to come back to Bethany as an alum and go on this trip. Bill has taught me to treat others how you would treat yourself. Andy Oberon taught me to think outside of the box. One of the quotes I admire most from Andy is, "We don't care about the labor, we only care about the baby." Meaning, the final product is far more important than the process of how it came about. My work, The 4 Seasons, has had many influences on me. My style has been developed by seeing my art teachers and my art professors' own works of art from 8th grade until now. I have taken bits and pieces from their styles and combined them together to create my own style. I prefer round brushes rather than flat brushes. This is because my style consists of short, quick brush strokes. This is one of many influences that have inspired my work. Remember when I mentioned Disney and travel? Well, the reason Disney is an influence on me is because of the imagery of the background and landscapes in Disney movies. 2 artists that have also influenced me are James Keel and Jan Van Eyck. James Keel was a still life painter. His still lifes consisted of fruits, and that's where several of my still lifes paintings are influenced by. Jan Van Eyck influenced me by a piece of his work called The Marriage Portrait. This painting had such an impact on me because of the symbolism within it. My artwork represents the ever-changing world around us, and how, like the seasons, brings out different emotions within a person. I paint for many reasons, but the most important reason I paint is to express my feelings. Like myself, the seasons have many emotions. Summer shows joy and happiness. Fall shows a little weakness, but still can be beautiful. Winter can be harsh, but when inside it is warm and cozy. This is shown in my painting, Winter Fever, which is on the back wall. Spring is like a turning point and shows hope for summer again. Each cycle of seasons bring ever-changing emotions and excitement for the next. My own emotions correlate with the seasons as well. Sometimes I feel like summer, other days I can feel like winter. Still life paintings allow me to interpret feelings through the different textures within an object. I would have to say that our show more illustrates expression and color. Beauty is outside your door. If you just step outside, and you will see the ever-changing seasons in all parts of the world. Red is a powerful color in my paintings as it can relate to many different emotions. This is shown in my 4 fruits over to your right on the back corner on the main wall. My life has been a roller coaster of ups and downs. My work is about the emotions within a person and how, like the seasons, people change over time. Just like the seasons and the world, I have newfound confidence within me. My goal one day is to work at Disney as a landscape or background artist. But for now, I like to stay in my local hometown, Stillwater, Minnesota, and express my emotions to others through my paintings that can be displayed in galleries. Thank you. Question time. Anyone? Yes, Andy.
Artists have made well, for a long time, artists have talked about expressing emotion through color and line and texture. But to a person just walking in from the street, that's kind of an alien concept. Are you able to put it into words how that works?
The question was, how can you show in your work color and emotions within your painting?
Are the emotions yours, or are they supposed to be in the viewer?
I feel like the emotion can be in the viewer as well as in myself. When I paint with music on, and when I paint, I just let out all my emotions. And I feel like the fast brush strokes within the painting, it can also have an effect on the viewer. Any other questions? Every single girl the question. What is your question for me?
My question for you is, I'm going to ask about this painting specifically with the apples here. 2 questions, actually. One is, it looks to me, who's not on how this at all. It looks to me, though, that that's like a lot of detail in there. So how long does it take you to paint a painting like that? My second question is, what is the emotion that you felt when you were painting this?
So the question was, how long did it take you to do your paintings, was the first question for this piece in particular. And the second question was how I was feeling while I was painting it. Well, like I said, from Andy's quote, you shouldn't care about the labor, you should just care about your lovely daughters. But it takes a lot of work to put in any piece of work. And so sometimes people just don't keep track, they just do it just for the fun of it and enjoying it. And then for your second question, what I was feeling during this painting, because this was my first painting I did when I started my capstone at the beginning of the year. I was like all pumped and ready, and I was like so excited. So I was like, okay, let's do this thing. I'm really happy to do it. And then I said, as the year went on, like I had roller coasters of up and down. So some paintings are more successful than others. So that was my feeling for this one in particular. Yeah, Ruben?
We all know that when a person has an emotion, it can change drastically, very rapidly, multiple times a day. Does that mean when you paint a painting that you let different emotions kick in, or do you paint it in the amount of time that you have only one emotion, or wait until a different day and when you have that emotion again?
The question was, do you paint when you have that emotion in mind, or do you paint constantly without the emotions? I would say I'm most successful when I have the emotion within me that I need to get out. And so I would go and be like, oh, I really need to paint. Like, I'm feeling this, or I'm feeling that, like winter, summers, or fall. Like, I want to go paint this now. So I guess it's the emotion I'm feeling during that time. So that's probably why it took me longer to finish my paintings. So, does that answer?
Yes.
Yes.
We were just at the Terry Redmond Art Center in Watertown, and he expressed putting light into the pictures as one of his strong points. I see a lot of light in your pictures. Are you focusing on that, or does it just happen?
Am I focusing on the light inside
You
the
got,
pictures?
yeah, all your pictures have light showing, accenting.
Yes. I purposely did an accent of lighting just to show the different colors within the painting. Because I feel like without the light, it's just a dull painting and you can't really see the different, colors within it. Any other questions? Yes.
This is I heard you say, well, Disney World, I'm also kind of obsessed with Disney World. But this is regarding that. But as an artist, I'm basically artistically in so I go to Disney World like, sweet, rides, and I love the food. But as an artist, you've been there many times, is there a particular park or a particular land in the park where you're like, that kind of speaks to me as an artist. Like, I really appreciate the detail that you put in here or there.
So the question was, is there a particular park at Disney World which I enjoy the most that inspires me as an artist? Well, there's 4 parks there. Magic Kingdom, Animal Kingdom, Epcot, Hollywood Studios. Yeah. So the 2 that brings my artist out would probably be Animal Kingdom and Magic Kingdom. Animal Kingdom because it's outdoors and it's more my work that I enjoy doing. And then with Magic Kingdom, just the way they display the entrance really speaks to me as well. Yes?
The question for the whole panel, if I could. This is the second week in a row we've had 5 women speak about their art. Where are the men at? Do you have any insight into why there are no men in upper division art classes?
I think so. I think it's a generation thing for me, because there's 3 fathers of the art department here, and now there's all girls here. And then I think all the men are in the media arts area here. Any advice from you guys? What do you think?
Men favor women.
Oh, the men are scared.
That's how it is at my job.
We scared them off, Angela says. Is that good? You like it? Jacob's upstairs. We have one upper division men. And he had a brother last year who was an artist, so.
What'd you do to him?
overwhelmed. Jacob doesn't have to worry about that. We're leaving. Any more? Angela? Did you know? Okay. Vika?
Which is your favorite painting?
This one. The one that I talked about. Is that okay?
Why?
Okay. So there's refreshments, like we said. So thank you all for coming. I hope you really enjoyed it. Thanks for all the questions.